Welcome to Running the Table, the podcast where we run through everything on the table in the world of college basketball. I'm back with Boom Buster Believable, the series where I take a deep dive into Big Ten's men's basketball teams and figure out if they've boomed, they're a bust, or they're right where we thought they'd be. Next on the list, and widely considered the 1A of the Big Ten going into this year behind Purdue, we've got the Michigan State Spartans out of East Lansing, Michigan. Just so happens I've got my Sparty green on today, so let's run it. Michigan State right now is currently sitting at 15-9 and 7-6 in the Big Ten. They obviously started out as second in the preseason rankings, right behind Purdue, but right now they're currently sitting at fifth, and they've had to work their way back there. Some key players for them, you start out, of course, with Tyson Walker, largely the heart and soul of this team, sitting at 19 points per game, 2.6 rebounds, 3.0 assists, 2.0 steals, and shooting 38.1% from three. Right behind him, you have Malik Hall, another veteran presence for the Spartans at 11.3 points, 5.0 rebounds, and 2.1 assists per game. Next up, AJ Hoggard, another veteran guard in the system. These three guys have really been sort of the bread and butter of this team, and the guys that have really been expected to hold it down, so it's no surprise to see them up at the top. AJ Hoggard is sitting at 11.2 points, 3.3 rebounds, 5.2 assists, and 1.0 steals per game, shooting 80.8% from the free throw line. Right behind him, you've got a great shooter on the wing, Jaden Akins, shooting 11 points per game, 3.9 rebounds, and 1 steal per game. Also shooting 38.7% from three. So he's right up there with Tyson Walker. Those guys are really the main two who hold it down from behind the three-point line. Heading into KenPom, Michigan State has kind of been all over the place. They've had some good wins and bad losses, but they have kept up towards the upper half of the KenPom rankings, currently sitting at 26th in offensive efficiency and 22nd in defensive efficiency, with an overall efficiency margin of 15th. So for a team that's 15-9, to be widely, at least considered by KenPom and a lot of the statistics, to be the 15th most efficient or 15th best team in college basketball is pretty interesting and pretty unusual. In terms of tempo, they're currently sitting at 298th in the country, so they're not very fast-paced team, and that kind of makes sense given their roster. They have, when you're led by Tom Izzo, you know what you're going to run. Tom Izzo knows the kind of basketball that he wants to play, and they're not exactly a roster that's built for getting up and down the floor pretty fast. And some of what goes into their 9 losses of the year is their current strength of schedule sitting at 10th. So they have one of the harder and widely considered hardest schedules in the country. So it's no surprise that they've lost some games, but losing 9 is certainly a surprise. Going into some of those wins and losses, some key wins and losses to start the season, they lost at home in the home opener, first game of the regular season, to James Madison, 79-76 in overtime. Now, James Madison was a team that did very well in the beginning of the season, and they were widely considered to be a borderline top 25 team, or they certainly could be, and they were a top 25 team for quite a while there in the first month or two, and they came into East Lansing and really took it to the Spartans. They were not going to back down, even though Michigan State opened up the year as the number 4 team in the country, and they took them to overtime and got enough to beat them. Next up, Michigan State ended up getting a much needed win after some struggling against number 6 at the time, Baylor, 88-64 on December 16th. So this was a massive win for them. They needed to get back in the win column, and they needed a statement win to prove that this team, has the talent and has the means to compete with the best in the country. And in that game, they absolutely did. Putting up 88 points against a team like the caliber of Baylor was very impressive, but it wasn't necessarily meant to last. They've been very inconsistent, and going into January, they ended up losing at number 10 Illinois, 71-68. The reason why I put that down as a key loss, not that it's a bad loss, but it was a key game that would have been massive for them to win. They've ended up getting some good wins surrounding that, so it wasn't that wasn't their only chance to get a marquee win for their resume, but only losing at at Illinois by 3 was definitely a winnable game, and one that they very much would have liked in terms of building their resume and just building momentum going into the new year there. But they were able to get their revenge, winning at home against number 10 Illinois 88-80 just recently here on February 10th. So they were able to get their revenge. They had another very solid game. You see some of these games like against Baylor and against Illinois where their offense is just clicking on all cylinders, but it just hasn't been consistent for them, especially on the offensive side. But this Michigan State team had sky-high expectations coming into the season. So it's not wild to say to see them at 15-9 in the middle of February is nothing short of shocking for this roster, even if they have been improving during the second half of the year. Tom Izzo-led teams aren't really known to struggle this much because of the caliber of coach that he is. And as much as I believe they will figure things out and continue to move in the right direction as we get closer to March, the question will be, will it be too little too late? Now, where they're at right now, they are in a comfortable position where their fate is in their own hands. But that can change quickly, especially with the lack of consistency, and they don't have a super easy schedule to end the year, but we'll get into that here in a little bit. When it comes down to it, Michigan State just wants to do what they can to get into the NCAA tournament, to get into March Madness, because Tom Izzo-led teams, once you get them in March, there is something about them where you almost have to buy in regardless of how they've been looking. Now, this year could be different. You know, as of right now, they are set to make it into the NCAA tournament. But the question is can they make a deep run? In a lot of games, they will be a popular upset pick, especially if they happen to be a lower seed. If they make it to the second round as an 8-9 seed and face a much higher seed, they're gonna be somebody that's really talked about, and rightfully so. But as of right now, the Spartans are projected as a 9 seed, according to Joe Lunardi's bracketology, which seems a bit surprising with 9 losses. But if you take a look at their 9 losses, none of them outside of James Madison to open the season, and maybe their loss at Minnesota recently, have been extremely damaging losses. Listing them out, you have James Madison at home, Duke at home, Arizona at home, Wisconsin at home. So right there, you have 3 straight top 25 or top 15 teams that you've lost to, even though Wisconsin has had a bit of a tumble lately. And even though all those games came at home, still, you could call them quality losses in a way because they're against quality teams. Then you have at Nebraska, who we found is just a different demon playing in Lincoln, at Northwestern, at Illinois, at Wisconsin, and then most recently at Minnesota. So you tell me, are any of those losses really that bad? I can see why Joe Lunardi has them in the tournament at the moment, but a 9 seed does feel like a little high for a team with this many losses, regardless of who they've lost to. But the Spartans' shortcomings have largely come on the offensive side of the ball, even with them ranking at 26th in the country in offensive efficiency. Most of their losses have come with them holding teams to a reasonable scoring level, but being unable to get enough production outside of their top 3 scorers. Tyson Walker, who we talked about at the top, has been the guy for the Spartans, being the clear leading scorer and leading the team in scoring for most of their games up until a little recently, where we've seen some more variation in the scoring there. But who steps out outside of Walker has been inconsistent from game to game. And not having a clear number 2 scorer isn't a great recipe for creating a consistent scoring offense. AJ Hoggard, Malik Hall, and Jaden Akins are all between 10 and 12 points per game, which would seem to speak towards a balanced scoring attack. But looking deeper, that hasn't really been how most of their games have gone. Those 3 guys average around that 10 to 12 because it's been all over the place, whether they get 6 or 18 to 23. We've seen Malik Hall and Jaden Akins lead all scorers on occasion with 20-plus points, but also throw up complete stinkers where they've been a complete non-factor, basically. On a similar vein, the Spartans' bench options haven't really lived up to expectations either. And that includes their top 5 recruiting class. Xavier Booker, Jeremy Fears, and Cohen Carr have all had a role in this team this year, with each averaging 10 minutes per game or more, except for Booker's minutes diminishing and actually being a healthy scratch for stretches as the season has gone on, but none of them average more than 5 points per game. Additionally, Jeremy Fears has been away from the team, recovering from a gunshot wound to the leg since mid-December, with no clear timetable to return yet. So that's had obviously a big effect on his numbers, and there's something to be said about that having an effect on the team as a whole. But this is a team that runs 10 deep, but nobody outside the top 4 scorers have really gained much traction in ways to help this team win games. But how did we get to this point? So Michigan State was largely considered to be a top 5 team in college basketball going into the season, coming in at number 4 in the preseason AP Top 25 poll, with 4 starters returning in Walker, Hogard, Akins, and center Maddie Sissoko. On a top 5 recruiting class, the stage was set for another Tom Izzo masterclass. But from the jump, things just haven't worked out that way. Since dropping the opening game of the season at home to James Madison, they haven't looked the part of a top 25 team, much less a top 5 team in the country. They've lost some close games against very good teams and have largely struggled in the Big Ten thus far, starting 1-4 in conference play, but turning around more recently to get to 7-6 where they currently stand. But what does Michigan State need out of their home stretch? To keep themselves in contention in the NCAA tournament, they'll need to win some of their key games down the stretch heading into the Big Ten tournament. They've got a key matchup coming up with their only matchup with Purdue this season when they travel to West Lafayette on March 2nd. If Purdue, stays at the number 2 team, jumps up to number 1, or kind of regardless of where they land within that top 5, most likely, that's going to be a key matchup in terms of cementing Michigan State's place in the NCAA tournament. If they drop a couple of games out of these last ones, whether it be Purdue or some other ones, they're going to have their work cut out for them. They'll find themselves very near the bubble, and the committee will have to make a decision on whether or not that this Michigan State team gets in based on merit and based on Tom Izzo's history, as well as, let's just say, the wins and losses that they have. As I've mentioned, they've lost some games to some very good teams, but they're going to need to make a convincing argument, whether it be by winning games or by showing something significant in these last couple of weeks heading into the Big Ten tournament, heading into the NCAA tournament, if they want a spot. Regardless, this is not what Spartans fans expected to see, and they're definitely hoping for a miraculous turnaround leading to an Izzo special deep tournament run. But that's all I've got for today. Expect to see plenty more college basketball since we're already in the middle of February, which kind of freaks me out. And the madness is right around the corner. So stay tuned, like and subscribe for more. But until next time, I'm out.